My name is Don Bowman. My company is Agilicus, and we make secure remote access for industrial environments. And today, that's exactly what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about how to enable multi-factor and single sign-on in a VPN alternative so that your vendors can support you in a safe, consistent fashion. So we'll talk a little bit about what that means. So critical infrastructure, manufacturing, shipping, water, etc. They have these needs, and the needs come down to the fact that they use things that are not just standard IT. They're not just a laptop and a server running SaaS. There's something physical. There's something attached, and those things have specialized domain knowledge of how people support you. And that might be your integrators. It might be your the manufacturers, the OEMs. It might be a joint venture where two companies work together, but it creates this need for a piecewise interconnectivity. And today that's often achieved with a VPN. And we're going to talk about the good, the bad, the ugly of the VPN. There's been a ton of warnings about VPNs this year. In the last few years, it came on everybody's radar a few years ago with the Colonial Pipeline attack. One VPN, one contractor, and suddenly there's no gasoline supply on the East Coast of the United States. Big deal. So what are the risks there? And we'll talk about VPN alternatives. How can you achieve the same business objective, but more accurately, how can you achieve a more efficient business objective with less risk and make it simpler for all parties involved? And we'll talk about how Zero Trust achieves that. So industrial control systems, they've got a long lifespan. You buy a box, on the front of it, it says Allen Bradley or Emerson or something like that. And you expect to own that for 15, 25 years. It's part of the plant. And it's part of the same capital cycle of that plant in terms of the steel, the pumps, the VFDs, whatever they are. And you're just not thinking that it's got a little processor and a little operating system in it, and that it maybe has a security patch cycle that's much more similar to your smartphone. But that's actually what's happened is over the last couple of decades, we've switched from everything being entirely interconnected with 420 milliamp current loops to Ethernet and Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and LoRaWAN and this and that and the other thing. And suddenly they got license managers that are interconnected to the internet. There's big data involved. You get specialists that are logging in order to support you. You've got tighter and tighter efficiency objectives, and it's all different. It's not like there's one thing you can say, okay, I got a strategy for X. Well, you've got 10 plants, and each of the 10 plants have 10 different variations of 10 different vendors. So there's 10,000 things right there. And it's not just the factory floor and the production. It could be things that are interrelated to it. We see this a lot with the facilities. So you've got security cameras and smart door locks and things, and the HVAC system, the building management. They're sort of interconnected with that network. They're sort of interconnected with the internet. They're sort of breaking your air gap, and you don't really think about lateral traversal coming in that way, but that's what's happening. And there's just a lot more constituents today, people that have a legitimate business need to work with your systems in order to support you. And they each have different scope and controls. And that's why we're talking about today a VPN, which is implicitly one scope and one control, is not an appropriate solution. So the VPN, what is it? Well, it's a really long Ethernet cable. Let's face facts. That's really what it is. It's just a way to get, layer 2 from one site to another, or layer 3, depending on your VPN, but as if you were physically present. And it really is a good solution for people that have sort of broad access needs. So your IT staff that needs access to everything, it's sort of designed for that. It's all or nothing, it's on or off. And it evolved from that dial-up concept where you dialed into your company, predating SaaS and cloud, where things were in a lot of locations. And it really was conceived around that singular company principle. Like when I started work, all users are alike. You came into work to do your work, and everybody had access to everything. That was sort of what it was then. It's not now. So the good part about the VPN, it just works. It's like being there. There's no additional steps once it's up. You can leave it running forever. The transport's encrypted. They trust the vendor. No one ever got fired for deploying it. Great. What's the bad? Well, you got a system integrator that's supporting you or a vendor, and you say, in order to support me, I need you to install my VPN. And they're like, no way. I don't want to install your software on my laptop. I got 100 customers I support. I can't install 100 different VPN. You have the same one that another guy uses, but it's a different version, and they conflict. I can't deal with it. Second thing you sometimes hear is, and this relates to how routing works. my video calls break up when the VPN is up. Well, it's because you use what's called a full tunnel VPN instead of a split horizon VPN. And what that means is that the upstream of all your users becomes a downstream of your company. As soon as they're connected to the internet, their Netflix goes through you, their YouTube, their Google Meet, their Microsoft Teams. You hear people say, I can't print at home. It's the same problem. It's turning off their local network. Another one that people sometimes complain about is, I'm willing to use your VPN, but my device is an X and the VPN client's not available for it. I use a tablet, it was supplied by my organization, there's an MDM, I just can't install it, thanks. Another problem you hear about is overlapping subnets, and this is more like a paper cut. Everybody and their dog uses RFC 1918 private IP space because we run out of IPv4. So you have 192.168 or 10 dot or 172 dot something at home, and your customer uses the same subnet, and the VPN can't route because you can't have the same IP address on both ends, and therefore you got to go change your IP. But now you're supporting 10 customers, and they each have this something that overlaps, and you're constantly changing your IP. It's terrible. So one of the downsides is, you bring up this VPN and everybody just shares this account. There's no multi-factor, it's just up all the time. That's what happened with the Colonial Pipeline. It was just a connectivity between the two offices and everybody had access to everything. The ugly part of the VPN, you're importing somebody else's business risk into your network, just flat out. It's not like having one person come to your site. It's their site is your site now. It's their person who picked up a bad USB key in the parking lot is in your network. Their phishing is your phishing. And risk is one of those things where you want the number to be smaller. The more people, it's kind of like Metcalfe's law. You square the risk as the double the number of people. And you just don't want that. So how do you work around it? Well, you switch away from a technology that's everything to everything. This year there's been, I don't even know how many emergency directives. This number came from January. Fortinet just had 2 in the last week. And how can you patch those things that quickly? It has access to everything. It's terrible. But I'm here to say, don't panic if you believe in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. There's a connectivity nirvana. So if you ask your user, you interviewed them and say, what would you want? Well, the first thing is they just don't want anything to do with IT. They just want it to be hidden and just work and never hear about it again. Because they just don't want, the system's down or the system's slow or something as part of their life. We're talking here about task-based workers. They've got, the singular tasks. I monitor the alarms on the HMI. I do this, I do that, as opposed to somebody who's a broad knowledge-based worker. And what they would say is, I access only the resources I need from the location and network of my choice, on the device of my choice, with my single sign-on credentials. And this is key. They don't want another username and password. This is a bad thing. So whether I work for you or I work for somebody who's doing work for you, I should be signing in with my company's credentials in both cases. I should not have a Don contractor at company A, Don contractor at company B. This is a bad practice. It's even worse when it's company name at company name. Hey, we have Siemens equipment. We get the Siemens account. Great, 200,000 people have access to that password. It's a terrible idea. So I phrase this as any user, any application, any device, any network, any time. That's what the user wants. They just want this to get out of their way. No matter how they want to work, they just want it to work. Presto, segue, zero trust. That's what that is. If the user, task-based worker, and their resource they're trying to access, they can just do that with nothing in the middle. And the only thing they have access to that resource, that's what we're talking about achieving. So zero trust there's 3 principles of zero trust. A lot of people say this is a very complicated thing to do. Zero trust is a very simple concept. The first problem you got to solve is the who problem. Who are you? That's identity. If every user is individually identified and authenticated against that identity, then you have the who problem solved. The what problem, what are you allowed to do? What's your role? What's your authorization? You got to solve that on a per user resource basis. So it's not, hey, Don, we trust Don, therefore Don can do everything. That's what the VPN does. We trust Don, therefore I'm done. And it's not just what, anybody can do this thing. No, that's not right. You need both of them together. And then the third one is how. That's how you access it. So if you have an individual gating between who can do what on what resource, you have zero trust. That's what we provide. So the high-level user view is fairly simple. Most things are browser-based. Now, not everything can be run in a browser. You've got things like Brockwell Studio, which are sort of traditional fat clients. But for the most part, they just interact via the web, whether it's their tablet or the phone. There's no software to provide. And remote desktop, SSH, web applications just function this way, your VNC for your HMI, etc. And they sign in using their existing company credentials, user at partner. So if you're company A and you're supported by company B and you work with Joe and Jane at company B, they will sign in as Joe and Jane at company B. That's the who problem. It's not giving them access. That's just identifying who they are. You control what they're allowed to do. So the who problem, you devolve, you hand that off to your partners and say, look, I trust you to know who works for you, and I trust you to get rid of people who don't work for you anymore. And therefore, you manage that. I'll manage what they're allowed to do. And that can be push-based. You get a notification. Joe at company A is trying to do this thing. Is Joe allowed? Yes. It can be time-based for the next 4 hours. Jane can do this thing. It could be whatever. But that's really what the high-level user view is they just see things as if they were on a local network, only for the resources they need. They don't see anything else. And there's no layer 3 routing, so you don't have to worry about changing your IPs. There's no software to install. You don't have to worry about the VPN not installing. These are supposed to be videos that are playing. Imagine they're beautiful. In the upper right, somebody is signing in via Microsoft Azure. In the bottom right, somebody signing in with multi-factor via Google with a passkey. Both of them are two different workers accessing the same thing, working for different companies. It's very, very simple to use. The end user sees it. This is really important from a phishing perspective. You don't want users seeing an inconsistent sign-in experience. Oh, you sign into system A with password A, you sign into system B with password B, and they look different. This is how somebody can send an email to you and say, to your team and say, hey, we've changed system B, you've got to go refresh your password. And because they're all different, nobody can keep track. If the sign-in experience is always identical, the theme is the same, the URL is the same, the little green icon's the same, the URL is the same, single sign-on, there's one password, there's nothing they have to remember, it's cached in their browser with multi-factor. This is so much stronger, and this is what we supply. Any user can sign in with any account, and then that's federated, and then you can do the authorization yourself. And it works even in the air gap. I have a really, really short demo to show, and it is pre-recorded, I know, because I'm lazy, but it just shows that sign-in experience super quickly using that VPN. So here they click to sign in. We can sign in with Google or Microsoft, but it could also be the company's Active Directory. Here I'm using Google because we're a Google Workspace shop, and I'm using the passkey off screen. My phone chirped, I clicked OK, and it let me in. The nice thing about that passkey is the phone has to be physically proximate. It uses Bluetooth Low Energy to do that. And here suddenly I'm just in this HMI, bam. We could do the same for any number of other things. The next thing in the demo I was going to show was logging into VT SCADA, a web-based app, and then it's going to show VNC. But you get the idea. The user signed in, they see a dashboard of all the little icons for each resource, and they just click on them and they just work like they were there. Why does this reduce your risk? Well, your shared accounts are gone. So you don't have to worry about HR churn. My partner has a person who used to work there and left on bad terms. If I had a shared account, that person who's left on bad terms has the credentials to my building. You don't want that. So now, because everybody is individually identified, it means when they leave that company, they're terminated, same as they would in your company. Overbroad access is gone. I talk a lot about blast radius, but the idea that a user has access to the entire network is told just to stay in their own area, that's really a downside of VPNs, is they plug in one bad USB key and it has access to the whole network, even though they're only supposed to be talking to one thing. With Zero Trust, they still only have access to the one thing they're allowed. There's an audit trail of all activities, trust but verify, Ronnie Reagan. You can enforce multi-factor authentication. This is one of the challenges when you have third party you're working with and you don't really know what their business practices are. So you can turn multi-factor authentication on in our system. So they provide the first factor of authentication through their Active Directory or Azure or Google or whatever, and you do a second, you force it in our system. And no shared software, no licenses, just reducing a lot of risk here. The implementation is really quick. This is a proxy-based model. There's no reconfiguration needed of anything. You don't reconfigure the network. Single outbound connection on HTTPS 443. Your firewall can be closed down on the inside. You can close it down. No inbound connectivity at all. And then there's no change, and none of the resources need to be reconfigured because it's proxy-based. It handles the authentication as a service for them, and they just work the way they always were. And just a few days later, bingo bango, your network's multi-factor. So my call to arms today is fairly simple. First, recognize that there's this growing underserved demographic. These people that don't work for you, that work for your partners, that want to be efficient, and you want them to be efficient because it shows up on your bill, it shows up on your mean time to repair. You want them to be able to get access to your SAP in order to help you debug a problem or deploy a new schema or do an upgrade. You want them to be able to help you with your RAID, your VX Rail. You want them to be able to, whatever it is, you don't want them to have to get in a car and drive to you. And you don't want to end up with a set of first class applications that work for your staff and don't work for anyone else, vacation planners and wikis and things like that. You want everybody to have everything universally because what data is all about. Things are getting smarter. They're getting more specialized. They're getting more online. Going back to that hypothetical factory up front with a room full of things that say Allen Bradley or Emerson, they've gotten a lot smarter over the years. And those HMIs now, there's a specialized person on the HMI, a specialized person on the control system, the ladder logic, etc. And you can't afford to bring all of them here locally, and you cannot afford to VPN them all in because of the risk. Security is getting more important. We're seeing a lot more advanced threats against industrial environments. They're either A, recognizing there's money there, like the Clorox hack at the very end of 2023. It was a lot of money. They lost a couple of quarters of productivity, hundreds of millions of dollars. But also you're seeing it in other types of critical infrastructure where there's maybe state-sponsored actors are interested, and maybe there's not a lot of money there, but they have alternative motives. And lateral traversal is really costly. Shutting down your business, what's the impact of that? There might even be human safety impacts. There might be, a big blower that's turned on or a big oven or something. Understand that a VPN is not an appropriate solution for everybody. They can't install it, they won't install it, the lateral traversal risk. And understand that single sign-on and multi-factor is required for everybody, not just your team and not just for critical applications and not just for administrators. This should be bread and butter, but it doesn't have to be more complicated. It can actually be very simple for the user to use. That example I showed in the little demo earlier, click, boom, they were in. There was no work. Their phone chirped, they clicked. They just had to physically have it. Multi-factor is any two or more of something you have, something you know, something you are. So in this case, the person had their credentials and they had the phone. So something they knew and something they had. And we'd love to chat with you afterwards. So we'll be reaching out. Feel free to email me, call me, etc. if you want more information or if you think I'm incorrect. Once again, my name is Don Bowman. My company is Agilicus, and we make the best secure remote access zero trust for industrial environments. Thank you so much, and have a great day.